Please tell me, did I ever wake up? This is a story that I've been very hesitant to tell. I'm honestly embarrassed by it. But it's one I have to get out there. I have to get it out of my head. When I was 17, I attempted suicide. I'd been battling my depression since the age of 6, and I'd been in and out of mental hospitals 2 or 3 times. And honestly, I felt defeated. I was lost, felt alone, and ready for anything other than this life. So I took all the pills that I could. I'm not proud of it, but it's what I did. And if you reach the point, I'm begging you please to seek out help. What I learned after the fact is that I had been rushed to the children's hospital and had been in a coma for over 2 weeks. If you're wondering why I was at the children's hospital at the age of 17, it's because my father was a network supervisor there and knew the other doctors. Here's something I need to explain. In the movies and TV shows, people wake up all at once. That's not how it worked for me. I woke up in phases, little bits of consciousness, and then lapsing back to sleep. Here's the other thing no one tells you. Respirators fucking hurt. Your brain naturally knows when it needs oxygen and takes a breath. The respirator doesn't give a shit. It rips air out of you and shoves it back in its own programming. People always ask me what I remember from the coma, and honestly, it's hard to answer. It all blends together, because like I said, you wake up in stages. For instance, I remember seeing babies screaming locked in cages in the coma. They were crying and screaming with their little hands gripping the bars. I figured it was a nightmare until a week after being awake, I looked around and noticed the cribs in an ICU really looked like cages. They're terrifying. Google them if you don't believe me. The only thing that I believe is the thought while I was in the coma was only one sentence. I should have woken up by now. The sentence tends to freak people the fuck out, and justifiably so. It was a terrifying thought for me. I was just existing in darkness with nothing around me. No sound, no physical feeling, and no sense of time. All I could think of was I had been asleep too long. I was only broken up by those strange images. The babies in cages. The sensation of things getting ripped in and out of me. In the sense that no matter what, I was trapped. Trapped within myself. And crying. I remember hearing crying. People don't like hearing things like this. So I never told them what happens next. I remember them removing the respirator. Mainly because it was extremely painful. It goes much further down your throat than you'd expect. I remember hacking and coughing. Because I hadn't had a single drink of water in weeks. My hands were restrained to the bed rails. Because as I woke up, I started pulling out the tubes in me. The nurses got tired of putting the IV, nasogastric tube, and of course the respirator back in. So I was restrained. But now I was awake. My brain was trying to remember how to breathe on its own. A dark-haired nurse with a clipboard leaned over me and said, "Who are you? Really, who are you?" My head started spinning as I tried to breathe, but I couldn't get in enough air. Then it all went black. The crying sound came back, the babies locked in cages screaming in pain and fear. I felt the pull of the respirator again. Did they put it back in? Why would they do that? And most importantly, who the fuck asked someone fresh out of a coma who they are? I remember them taking the respirator out again more times, all ending with the nurse asking me the same question, and me losing consciousness again. As they were pulling it out the 5th or 68th time, I honestly lost count. I forced through the fog to try and say something. Anything that would break the torturous loop. The dark-haired nurse leaned in and I blurted out the only words I could think of. I said, "I should have woken up sooner. I should have. I'm awake. I'm awake now." The dark-haired nurse leaned over me and whispered, "What makes you so sure of that?" The darkness took me again. Finally, things became more clear. And I was eventually released from the hospital after proving I was physically well and mentally no longer endangered myself. All the nurses and doctors gathered to see me off, because I had been there for months, and honestly I shouldn't have made it. They all congratulated me as they rolled me out, all except the dark-haired nurse, because she wasn't there. When I asked about her, no one knew who she was. It's been 20 years since then, but I still have the dreams every night. I hear the crying and see the children in the cages, in that sickening pool of the respirator before I scream myself awake. I remember that more than I remember the events of the day. Nothing eventful had happened in my life since then, but the dreams still come every night. If they're not dreams at all, so please, can you tell me, am I awake? Tell me before I feel the pull of the respirator again. I can't stand waking up again.